Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is no other than Ed Wasson. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your background. What do you got going on?
Well, I'm currently going through a master's course in international relations and global security. And overall, I've been doing something similar to that roughly for about 31 years. Military, law enforcement, security, homeland security support, intelligence, Arabic translations, anti-money laundering investigations.
And you were in the service, and you were, where did you end up? I know you had a couple of different deployments.
Right. Yeah, so I started in the Marines in 1987 and ended up going to Desert Storm 1991, and then hopped around a little bit out of the Marines and ended up doing different military and intelligence type stuff on and off between about 1993 to about 2012. So I did counter drug support for a little while, law enforcement, post 9/11, got back in a military unit, ended up going to the Arabic school, intel schools, then Operation Iraqi Freedom, and then straight into Guantanamo Bay. So I was deployed a little bit.
Yeah, I remember some of the stories about Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. We kind of talked about that previously. I know that you have a podcast too, right?
Not really a podcast as much. I'm just doing basic social media right now, so I'm primarily on TikTok.
Okay. And you have your own, like, intel. I know that myself, like, it's like a natural gift that I have is for intel, right? Like, I just have a really good memory. I don't know, for me, like, I watch a lot of your stuff just because it's a lot of, like, really good information. If you're an intel nut, right, like, you'll get a lot of that stuff. Talk to me about, like, your theory right now with the out of order chaos. Like, I kind of picked up on that.
Right.
What is that? Like, what is it about?
Well, what came to me was I kept hearing Tulsi Gabbard say global elite, and I'm kind of skeptical. So first of all, I started researching whether even such a thing exists or exactly what it is. And it does in fact exist, but it's called the Transnational Elite complex. And another aspect of it is called the Transnational Capitalist Class. So basically TEC and TCC. And I've formulated a theory that I'm still gelling out in part of this master's course. I might hold off on it and see if I want to push it to the PhD dissertation or whatever. But essentially, I've taken about 26 historical scenarios where even if it's a natural disaster or a war, or if it's insider trading or whatever, some aspect or element of the transnational elite complex or the transnational corporate or capitalist class benefits from it. And so far I got a rough outline of about 30 pages, roughly 30 sources. The academic sources are a little bit scarce on it though, but I have made a few charts, probably about 7 charts, where you can see historically it's hard to pinpoint that they may have initiated something, but even if it's a natural disaster, they end up benefiting from it. Well, you can see in the charts, and people are going to say correlation doesn't mean causation. Sure, exactly. That's what we're saying. But after you keep seeing the historical pattern, incident after incident, it appears as if it's pretty easy to say that geopolitics and socioeconomics are greatly shaped and influenced by a transnational elite complex.
So when you talk about transnational elite, are you talking about some folks that are like way above us, that are like, they're basically our puppet masters, I would sort of say. Like, they're coming up with stuff to make themselves wealthy, coming up with these geopolitical incidents, coming up with these diseases, whatever you want to come up with, right? Like, all this stuff that's happening that we are starting to see just for their own, like, is it for their own wealth? Is it their own amusement? Like, what is it that you're kind of like seeing in your theory here?
Well, the first thing I had to do is the challenge was to provide a clear definition of what I mean by the transnational elite complex and the transnational capitalist class. So so far, what I've got hammered out is the transnational elite complex might be somebody like a career politician, like Nancy Pelosi. And when you can look at those insider trading scenarios or alleged insider trading scenarios, you and I took classes on those. We had to take classes on that annually. And by definition that we were given for little people like us, what she did would have met the definition of insider trading. So there were situations that she possibly even helped engineer that she benefited from. Now, if you go into something like the pandemics and such, as far as their motives, it can be a variety of things. They could have genuine, interest in helping people, but there is not a scenario I've found where they don't benefit one way or the other. So it could be them benefiting from shoring up control. With your transnational capitalist class, we're talking like people way above the echelons of reality, like the George Soros types, these guys that are going to the World Economic Forum in Davos annually and such, controlling major swathes of the, Jeff Bezos, etc. So those guys, one way or another, when you look at it and you see somebody like Donald Trump isn't even on the top 100 richest men in America. I think it's kind of by design. There's so many other people above him that if they wanted to engineer it for their benefit, in general, prolonged wars, switching up politics, keeping the populace divided, keeping people confused, that chaos, they basically manage that chaos. Something can occur naturally all the time, like pandemic or a natural disaster or whatever, but they're still going to be the ones that manage it once they get in there, and they're going to be the ones that ultimately benefit from it in multiple ways, usually.
That kind of leads me to the whole like Russian-Ukraine war, where I don't have a sway either way.
Right.
Like I'm not from the Ukraine, I'm not from Russia. Like I've never gone to either one. I'm sure they're both beautiful, right? Like I have no sway either way. I was reading something the other day about like the U.S. is really like an arms dealer,
right?
And it's like to their benefit. It is for them to have wars and battles and stuff like that because they're the ones supplying most of the weapons, like, and then they leave them behind. Like they don't really care because we're just mass supplying this stuff. What are you kind of seeing with the Russian-Ukraine war? Do you see like a stoppage? Do you see them taking over land, or I hear about mineral rights, stuff like that? Like, what are you seeing?
Well, that is a good scenario because it does spin right off of that transnational elite class and the prolonged war kind of situations, because I was hoping that once President Trump came in, that he could try to at least provide some sort of change or quicker resolution to it. Pretty much everybody knew that when he was saying, have it over in 24 hours, that was just talk. But I was hoping that it might have a resolution by the end of 2025. Now I'm thinking maybe more like 2026 at the earliest. And all the indicators that I'm seeing is that there's a lot of indicators it could be a very prolonged and protracted war, which is ultimately it's not going to benefit what the socialists will call the proletariat or the working people or the soldiers. It's not benefiting them, but it is benefiting somebody. And there's actually people here in America that are saying, hey, we need to keep supporting Ukraine because it's providing the defense industrial base here with Raytheon, Boeing, Bechtel, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. These guys have jobs now. They've got billability and job justification, which I'm all about, helping the American economy, but not at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives over there. Because like you said, I don't have a dog in this race. I'm American. I'm not Ukrainian or Russian.
Right.
I don't want to see these people fighting.
Yeah, and I don't really understand. They put a lot of stuff. I don't want to go really into the media and stuff, but like we see a lot of stuff where, it's a young child with their legs blown off.
Right.
Like, what does that have to do with mineral rights or some sort of end of a war? Like, what is it that they're really going after outside of just mass destruction on some level?
Yeah, and what you mentioned is commonly referred to as like atrocity propaganda. We're seeing it on both sides as well, and not just there, but anywhere else, Middle East, etc. But a lot of people are saying that they think that Putin and Russia need the war to continue because, number one, their economy is now war-driven more. And some studies are indicating that demographically, they're not looking good till past 2050. Like, it's not looking good for them because of the human losses. And at the same time, Putin needs to shore up control domestically. Without this conflict, you're looking at a potential uprising of sorts in that region. But this is, again, Russia's pretty well controlled by the oligarchs, and they like Putin, obviously. So they're going to do what they have to do to keep the masses there at bay. They're keeping them occupied by the war economy and that type of production, and the Kremlin controls. It's all state media there. So
right.
If you see any of those other podcasters that appear to be American, but they're kind of aligned more with Putin and Russia, look into their bios. A lot of times they're writing or doing stuff for Russia Today or Sputnik.
You mentioned like the Middle East, and like I don't want to get really too into what's going on 100% with different countries and stuff, but anybody that just turns on the news, they could probably see. But going back to kind of what I was talking about with the little girl, like what are you seeing in that particular region and that conflict? Like what is it that their real goal is outside of just mass destruction, rebuild, takeover of land? Like what is it that you're kind of seeing on that side of the world?
Yeah, so for like Russia, Ukraine, Putin framed that as more like a territorial conflict. Some of the regions in the east, their demographics have changed supposedly, and Putin wants demilitarization and supposedly denazification and security. He's also framed like the eastward expansion of NATO, which even some academics cite as a partial cause. Now, in the Middle East, it's going to be all-out total war as well, and Netanyahu has framed it as almost like existential survivalism, and pretty much on both sides. So Hamas, for their part, 10-7, I'm not quite sure what they were thinking or what their motivations were. But sometimes I look at that and I say, what were they thinking? Because if it would have been any other prime minister in Israel, they might have gotten away with a little bit more, or we might have been to the peace table or negotiating table at some sort of different time mark. But with Netanyahu in there, and they knew, I have to think that they knew what they were doing. They really pushed the button there, and Netanyahu is like all in, and he doesn't seem to be wanting to go to the peace table, whereas people were thinking, okay, they're going to back out, things are going to
stop, right?
Right, it's going to get normalized sooner or later. Now you're talking about more and more, probably close to 1 million or more being permanently, if not semi-permanently relocated, and they've pretty much leveled most of the strip. So this has been just an all-out pretty much eradication. So for the causes of that, or what their goal or motivation was, seems to be to completely root out Hamas, and then basically by design also at least relocate a huge portion. And Netanyahu's always thought that there's always been a Palestinian state. He thinks it's Jordan. So I think he wants to just get them out of there, because since Hamas won those elections, they've been a thorn in his side the whole time.
Do you think that's part of like going back to what you talked about in the beginning, like the order of chaos? Like, do you think it's, hey, look, like we're going to distract people with these situations, these flare-ups. We have news now. People can't focus on, creating a better life for themselves or doing different things or looking at things differently, because we're just going to, have these situations where not only do we benefit because, we have different wheels in motion and financial situations. Is that kind of like what you're thinking as well?
Well, you see a lot of more conspiracy-minded people kind of aligning with that, thinking Israel went in there to basically level it out for different things like certain oil rights or the Ben Gurion Canal or IMIC, which for people that might not be familiar, that's the India, Middle East, European corridor. Some people call it IMEC because there should be two E's in there. Sometimes it's just written with one E, IMEC. Basically, that's going to be a trade corridor that may end up being at least partially linked to China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, because it's going to go from Piraeus, Athens, Greece, the port in Athens, scheduled to go into Haifa, Israel. Now some conspiracy-minded people are thinking it's going to go into Gaza somewhere, which I doubt, because they've already got a deep water port in Haifa. Nobody wants to spend more money just building another port.
Right.
From there, it's going to go across the Middle East into Dubai, and then from Dubai, it's going to go into India. So it's going to be a whole trains, planes, air, water shipping. There might even be, I think they might even develop a pipeline. So that's in the works, probably. Ben Gurion Canal was part of the conspiracy theory. That's not even started. So if it starts at all, it's supposed to be like a 10 to 15 year project that's going to basically take everything off of the plate of Egypt's Suez Canal and get more ships through faster. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but they have already got IMEC going on. So that's the conspiracy theory is there, but that was already in place probably, and those ideas were already in place years ago before October 7th. So after that, Netanyahu's all in. But one thing we'll say is that another thing that Hamas kind of played into Netanyahu's hands is that he was kind of suffering some political instability internally for a while before this kicked off. And this, like Putin in Russia, this gives him an opportunity to shore up control domestically and keep everybody basically actively engaged.
And keep his seat, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
I think one thing that we're all kind of not paying attention to is the whole India and Pakistan flare up. I have no idea, to be really honest.
Well, they had a big media shutout there as well.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know what they're fighting over. It could be a piece of land. It could be a bag of potato chips. I have no idea. And I'm not trying to offend anybody. It's just that nobody's really giving any real coverage outside of hey, there was a little firefight here or firefight there. Yeah. What are you kind of hearing about that little conflict out there?
Well, it started off, they've got this contested region in the Jammu Kashmir area of far east Pakistan and northeast India. India has basically control of part of it, and Pakistan has control of part of it. So there's been a territorial dispute there for decades, since probably 1948, I think it is. Wow. That's another area that a lot of people are talking about long-standing historical British divide and conquer in the Indo-Pak region. So this is one of those things where next thing you know, you have India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Well, for India and Pakistan, this has been a touch point for years, and they usually have a flare-up there, a little bit of a skirmish. Now, India always frames it as it's one of these non-state actor or terrorist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed that's out of Pakistan. And they basically saying that the Pakistani ISI, essentially their version of the CIA, basically controls Lashkar-e-Taiba or LET. Well, LET about 2 weeks ago went into Jammu Kashmir, or a splinter group or whatever, went in and basically massacred 26 Indian tourists I believe they were on a bus. I got conflicting stories of that. So some of the details were they got on the bus and they started asking everybody for their IDs and making sure that they were Indian first, and then asking them to say the Shahada or the profession of faith of Islam. And if they couldn't or didn't, they were just shot right there. Yeah. Right there. So India says that's what triggered it. Then they shut off access to water to the Indus River. The next thing you know, it just escalated. But it's one of those flare-ups. This is probably the most significant flare-up direct military action from them since the two countries basically emerged, and it's already over. Because everybody was talking nuclear. Yeah, a lot of people were fear-mongering over, here we go. Here's another forever war. This is starting with two nuclear powers, but neither one of them wants nuclear heat. And this proved pretty much, in my opinion, that neither one of them can even sustain long conventional war. I don't think they're even up for war fighting. I think there was losses of jets on both sides. I'm not quite sure exactly how effective their missiles were. So now the Pakistanis have Chinese versions of Chinese aircraft, basically. The Indians have much more expensive French aircraft. They're saying that Pakistan shot down more of the more expensive French made
like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of posturing, but a few days ago, Trump went in and he said, "Hey, we've talked about immediate and total ceasefire." So far, that is going on, and India, I think today recently expelled one of the Pakistani ambassadors or something like that. So there's still a lot of heat. They still need to work things out, and that's just never going to happen totally. But they're also not going to go to total war either.
Talk about China. China is, we had somebody on the podcast talking about China. I've seen some stuff where a lot of like entrepreneurs, business owners and stuff talk about how, they'll send something to China, right? I know it's probably a little off topic, but we have entrepreneurs and stuff on the podcast. So like you'll send something like this pen to China and it's, trademarked to US, and then what the Chinese do is they take it and they're like, because we need the supplies, right, to get the pen built, and we need it at a cost that we can afford to sell it to other people. So we send this pen out to them, and then they turn around and like take our idea, send the pen back, and then now they've got their own blue pen, but it may have a slight difference. Instead of it being, a rubberized grip with 3 notches, it's 4 notches or something, right? And they take it and then they turn around and sell it for, I don't know, $3 less than what it costs or what it is that I market for.
Right.
And somebody goes on to, I don't know, in a drop shipping company, and then they end up selling it to mass people because they really like this pen, but they don't really care that it has 3 notches and it has 4, right? And they're saving money. Talk to me a little bit about China and not only like the trade deficit, but also, or not the trade deficit, but the tariffs. Talk to me about like the trade war. Talk to me about what they're trying to do with like the coastal stuff. They're like trying to get other nations involved. And kind of what I'm seeing is like a lot of countries are trying to get their own trade, be more self-sufficient, align themselves with different partners now. Right. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, fulfillment by Amazon. So, yeah, you got big. A lot of people don't realize just how deeply intertwined and interdependent the economies of U.S. and China are. So, a lot of people that are fear-mongering about potential conflict in the future, on one hand, that interdependent economy is one of the biggest mitigants for potential actual direct military conflict. But the other one is, of course, mutually assured destruction with nukes. But with the economy, I'm not an economist, but what I will say is that I don't think it's a huge deal or a game changer. I mean, it's a little bit of a game changer. It's not a showstopper if the U.S. and China economically decouple a little bit, which is, I think, one of the main fears. If there's going to be if the tariffs are going to continue, or they're going to be talked about more, and that's going to drive fears, or it might drive like worry about stock markets and things like that. Our economies are overly dependent upon each other anyway. So the U.S. is overly dependent as a consumer. We're overly dependent on their production. They're overly dependent on our consumption. If we decouple a little bit, I think it's a win-win for both countries. At the same time, while they're doing their Belt and Road Initiative, sometimes it seems like, especially in Africa, it's like all those countries are being slapped around like vaudevillians, or slapping them around. One year it's Russians, one year it's Chinese, the next year it's Americans. And America has trained a lot of the military leaders in Africa that have staged coups. Well, China needs that Belt and Road Initiative coming out of there, and we're all mutually dependent upon each other. So now you got we've talked about conspiracy theories where it's like, the Hunter Biden and the Biden's influence peddling with his father's position in U.S. politics and getting involved in cobalt mines in Democratic Republic of Congo where it's deregulated, there's no safety. The people and the lands are being totally exploited. And the international community, regardless of who's leading it, currently it's the U.S., if it ever changes, if China ever rises up more, it's going to be the same thing. At the same time, China is bolstering its coastal defenses because they're worried as we're bolstering our alliances with the ASEAN nations, all those Southeast Asian nations. Philippines are also in there. We're bolstering in relations with Philippines, Japan, Taiwan. We almost have a mutual security agreement with Taiwan pretty much. If China attacks, which I don't see it happening, but if they do, if it's a military attack, the U.S. may go in and help or support Taiwan just like they're doing Ukraine. And a lot of people are talking about how the U.S. aid and NATO aid to Ukraine was kind of slow walked in there. NATO is a large enough alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, led by the United States, by the way, the SACEUR of NATO, the Strategic Allied Commander, Europe, it's always a U.S. 4-star general or admiral. We're deeply involved in NATO. If we really wanted to punt Russia out of Ukraine, we should have been able to do it by now. So that's another one of the reasons that people think that this is being slow-walked, it's being prolonged. And I think there are some suggestives or indicators that something similar could be brewing with Taiwan because for the simple fact that they're basically in the media almost prepping people mentally and emotionally for it. They're definitely preparing the military for it. Marines and some personnel in our Navy think we're going to war with China by 2028.
Wow.
They've actually personally told me that.
Wow. Because of all this chaos, because of all this like instability here and there and like the prolonged wars, do you see any issues like on the home front? Like will Homeland Security be affected? I see like this thing about like clear cards and all that when you go flying. And that's like a whole different subject about government, controlling us. But like, what do you kind of anticipate with like Homeland? Is there going to be an issue with, travel, flying, people over here doing things that they shouldn't be doing? What do you kind of see?
Well, one interesting thing I saw spark up was New Year's Day with the attack in New Orleans by that, I forgot his name.
He drove into some people, right?
Another big thing is like, where's your barricades?
Right.
And then just recently they had another attack by somebody with some mental issues in Vancouver. And not only did they not have the barricades up for a street festival, he called the police and like mental health services several times before he did his attack in Vancouver. So I'm like, how often does this have to happen? Because, we have 81 Homeland Security supported intelligence fusion centers in the United States, 81.
Wow.
And that's not counting DEA, FBI, and other stuff. We want, how much of a surveillance state do we need to be under before we have protection and somebody actually puts up the barricades? It's something simpler, you know? But it's interesting because the attacker in New Orleans allegedly had an ISIS flag in his truck. And recently, Iraqi authorities have come out in the news saying that they have arrested somebody in Iraq that they're claiming is with ISIS that motivated or otherwise inspired or pushed his button, basically. So you have that going on, and it's one of the things I find interesting is you still have this potential for lone wolf strikes. And that's something that's hard to detect in time and defeat. And coupled with that, the fact that we have a mental illness issue in America. So it's always there. It's always a button ready to be pushed by anybody, pretty much anytime. This guy can just go off. And it's hard. It's going to be hard to detect it, and it's going to be hard to defeat it.
Right.
But it goes to another point I made a while back. There's still a little bit of fear mongering on it. You got to get out there and live your life and everything. It's not World War III or something, but live your life, but just be a little bit alert and prepared. But there's I I believe she's a retired CIA analyst named Sarah Adams. She's been on the Sean Ryan show and such. He asked her who's the top, threat group in the world right now, and she sticks with Al Qaeda.
Well,
it's the guy in New Orleans, the San Bernardino shooters, the Pulse nightclub shooters, the Barcelona Cabrils attack, and more have all been with ISIS, not Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda's been diminished since 2004, and Al Qaeda had a completely different ideology. ISIS's ideology is global caliphate by whatever means now. And that's where you're going to get more of that homeland security threat of a lone wolf attacker. And I think that's going to be persistent and remain with us for some time. So live your life, but you just got to keep your head on a swivel a little bit.
If somebody wanted to see more of your stuff or hear more of your theories, where would they go?
I'm primarily on TikTok at Rebel Intel, but I've also got that on Instagram, and I'm probably going to expand into YouTube. And I've got a Substack where I'm actually writing sometimes up to 10 to 20 page intelligence briefs. And I'm putting that up there. I'll put the videos up there in Substack eventually as well.
Awesome. Ed, thank you for coming out and being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.